Hey, good afternoon from Gettysburg. Just about to start today's tour, which is Fight for Kuhn's Brickyard, Kuhn''S, Kuhn's Brickyard, here on the north side of Gettysburg, an engagement that took place on the first day of battle, July the 1st, 1863. So, before we get started on the actual, there goes the tripod. Before we get started on the actual tour itself, as you can see, for the battlefield, I'm in an interesting location. I am in a residential area. So why am I in a residential area? Well, over 150 years ago, this was wheat fields. Since the battle, this has been built on. So the area in which we're talking about today, the area in which this engagement took place on July the 1st, 1863, was at the time to the north, the west and the east of this position was ripening wheat fields. Bearing in mind it was July and good weather, and so it was ripening wheat fields. There were a few houses here, but not many, a few brick houses that were here. One of those belonged to the Kuhn family, who owned the Brickyard. So we're talking about how a single brigade of Union infantry under Colonel Charles Coster, a 23-year-old brigade commander here at Gettysburg, how that single brigade was sent forward to act as a rear guard, as like a speed bump, to not prevent but to delay the Confederate advance from the north. So we're talking about Richard Ewell's corps, particularly we're talking about Jubal Early's division, and they would act as a delay to allow the rest of 11th Corps, so we're talking about Schurz / Schimmelfenning's division and Barlow's division, to fall back on the town. So the street behind me here is Stratton Street. So we're kind of parallel to Baltimore comes down the hill and you get the travel circle. Then we go out on Carlisle, and as you go past Gettysburg College, you can make a right on Stevens Street and come down and intersects with Stratton Street. Coster's brigade actually that day didn't come directly through the town centre. They actually came down Stratton Street. As I say, these houses weren't here. It was a farm road. It was a dirt road at the time. And when they reached the intersection here with what's now Stevens Street, they made a right and they turned into Kuhn's Brickyard. It's now called, you can see that, Coster Avenue, because it's Park Service property. At the time there was a gate here, so they would have come through the gate into the Brickyard and the engagement kicked off. But there's a lot before that. So who were they? Why were they here? Why did Howard send them forward, etc., etc.? So we're talking about the first day of battle, July the 1st, 1863. The battle commences, as you know, with A.P. Hill's division coming in from Cashtown. The lead division of that, Harry Heth's division, runs into John Buford's cavalry. John Buford's cavalry holds for as long as it can, by which time John Reynolds' First Corps has come up with infantry support to support the Union cavalry. So that begins a general engagement, a meeting engagement, which turns into a fair-sized ruckus over on the west side of town between A.P. Hill's Corps and John Reynolds' Corps. Arriving after Reynolds is 11th Corps under Oliver Otis Howard. They begin to deploy north of the town. The idea is that, as Howard sees it, is that he's going to send two of his divisions forward. He has 3 divisions. He's going to send 2 of his divisions forward. Those are Carl Schurz's division and Francis Barlow's division. He'll keep 1 division under Steinwer in reserve up on Cemetery Hill, which he sees as a good defensive position, as a good fallback position. So that's the situation. We have 1st Corps to the west of town, have 11th Corps moving north. You would hope they'd make a junction there and make a tie into each other's flanks. 1st Corps, right flank, 11th Corps, left flank. They failed to do that because the 11th Corps, after the Battle of Chancellorsville in May, is woefully under strength. Their divisions are only numbering 2 brigades each. They don't quite have the manpower, even when stretched thin, to make that line, which means that they fail to capture high ground. Beyond the north of town is high ground, particularly to what will be 11th Corps' left is Oak Hill and Oak Ridge. Well, Richard Rhodes gets there first with his division of Confederates, part of Ewell's Corps. He gets infantry up there, he gets artillery up there, and it's a strong defensible position. It enfilades the right flank, the open right flank of 1st Corps, and it begins to enfilade the open left flank of 11th Corps. So the situation is pretty grim for 11th Corps. They're spread thinly north of town, and they are on low ground. It's not very defensible because, as I said, it's open wheat fields. So when we see trees on the battlefield today, those trees were not here at the time. There were many fewer trees on the battlefield than there are today. So at best, you're going to be able to duck behind a fence line, split rail fence that doesn't provide you with much cover whatsoever. So 11th Corps, those 2 divisions of 11th Corps that have been advanced north of town, have failed to take the high ground. They've been beaten to it by the Confederates, and they're in a difficult position. Over on the left, John Reynolds has been killed. Command of 1st Corps falls to Abner Doubleday, who's the senior divisional commander in 1st Corps. Now, command of the army in the field now derives from Reynolds was the senior officer on the field. The senior officer on the field is now Oliver Otis Howard. He turns over command, technically, of 11th Corps to Carl Schurz, his senior division commander, and Howard assumes field command of the Union Army as it stands on the field. He sends messages back to Slocum, 12th Corps, and to Sickles and 3rd Corps, saying, hurry up, the battle's going to be right here. There are conflicting messages because, of course, Mee is already thinking, doesn't know that there's an engagement here at the moment. He's sent contradictory orders to Slocum, for example, to fall back on the Pipe Creek line. So Slocum dithers. Sickles is coming in from the south of town and will join them eventually, but at the exact moment that Howard takes command, he only has 2 corps on the field, 2 corps on the field, 1st Corps and 11th Corps. They are both weakened. They both number around 10,000 men each, so they're not very strong when compared to A.P. Hill's Corps, Ewell's Corps. We're talking 30,000 men. So the Union forces are outnumbered by a factor of 2 to 1 to 3 to 1 out here to the west and the north of town. And so particularly these 2 11th Corps divisions that suffered terribly at Chancellorsville barely 2 months before are now being hit again and being hit very hard. Up on Cemetery Hill, where Howard has good vision of the battlefield, as if you've been up onto Cemetery Hill, East Cemetery Hill, you'll appreciate the view that you can get across the town, and imagine the town not being as built up as it is today, but remove all the modern buildings in your mind, and you'll imagine that you can actually see a very great distance from that hill. So he can see that he is going to have to pull his men back. His men are being pressed. Barlow's division is about to be overrun on what's Blocker's Knoll. Down there on the Union right, what's now known as Barlow's Knoll. If you take the tour, there's a statue of Francis Barlow up there on Barlow's Knoll. So Barlow's division is about to be overrun. Schimmelfennings will have to fall back as well because it can't have 2 open flanks. And Howard has a tough decision to make. Howard only has in reserve a single division. That single division only numbers 2 brigades, so he has very few men in reserve that he's able to throw forward. So Howard's got this difficult decision to make. He can either watch all the lines crumble and hope that the men make their way back and keep that whole division up on East Cemetery Hill, or he can deploy some men forward from East Cemetery Hill in their support. He knows that 3rd Corps is coming. He knows that Dan Sickles is coming with 3rd Corps. He hopes that Slocum is coming with 12th Corps, but Slocum is slow in coming. But he hopes that they're coming. He knows if he is prepared to sacrifice 11th Corps, if he is prepared for 11th Corps to take a pounding here north of town and falling back through the town, that may buy enough time for reinforcements from 3rd Corps, from 12th Corps, from all the other Union Corps that are moving up to reach Gettysburg, to reach his position on Cemetery Hill, to extend and improve the Union defensive position on Cemetery Hill, which is going to be if you get cannon up there, it's going to be a Gibraltar. So is he willing to essentially sacrifice men to win the battle? And the answer is yes. It's a terrible decision to make, and it's a decision obviously that commanders do not want to make, but armies are here to fight, and armies are here to fight battles, and men will die in battle, and it's a question for Howard to answer between him and his maker about whether he made the right decision that day. So Howard decides he will send one more brigade from his reserve. That only leaves him one brigade up on to hold Cemetery Hill, but he will send forward one brigade with a battery of artillery to the north of town, and he selects Charles Costa's brigade to go forward. So Costa's brigade of Steinwehr's division will go forward, and it will act as a rear guard, a fallback position. It will reinforce the rear guard as Barlow and Schimmelfenning fall back into the town. They're starting to lack unit cohesion at this point, so they really are starting to, I wouldn't describe it as a rout, I would just describe it as a disorganized retreat. So Costa's brigade, we are talking about a brigade of, the day before Gettysburg, about 1,400 men in 4 regiments.
I remember when I first started guiding, there was a booklet in the book
There's
about that.
a tour coming past me with one of the blue coat, blue jacket tours, so just let them pass. So Costa's brigade. Costa's brigade is 4 regiments in strength, 2 New York regiments, 2 Pennsylvania regiments. So now if you know that at full strength a regiment should be, if you just brand new recruited that regiment and put them into training, should be around 1,000 men. So in theory a full strength brigade of 4 regiments should be 4,000 men. This is July 1863. This is not the first engagement for the Army of the Potomac. There have been significant casualties throughout the war, and so at the commencement of the Battle of Gettysburg, the brigade, instead of 4,000, numbers around 1,400 men. The day before the battle, 50 men from each of the regiments, so a total of 200 men, have been formed into a detachment under a major, so formed into a temporary battalion under a major, and sent towards Emmitsburg as a protective and a scouting measure to see, because they don't really know at that point where Lee's Army of Northern Virginia is, and so they're having to send out scouting parties in all directions to try and find that army. So a detachment of 200 men is pulled from that brigade, which is already at small strength, reducing the brigade even further to around 1,200 men. So when Costa is sent forward with his 4 regiments, his 4 weakened regiments, he's also sent forward with a battery of artillery in support of him, which will deploy on his left flank. It's Heckman's battery, which I believe is Battery K, 1st Ohio Light, comprising 4 Napoleon smoothbore 12-pounders. So they're the ones, if you tour a battlefield, they're the ones that are green. They're the ones that have oxidized in green. They are a brass cannon. At the time, they would have been highly polished because the cannoneers, the artillerymen, were very proud of their weapons. They would have kept those brass cannons as clean as possible in between engagements, but it's only because they've been sitting out on battlefields for 50 plus years now without anybody coming out to polish them that they've oxidized and turned to that green. So when you tour a battlefield and you see those green cannons, those are Napoleons. The ones that you see in black will be the 3-inch ordnance rifles and the Parrots, which were made of iron and then painted black to prevent oxidization of those. So that's how you can tell which Napoleon is, and the Napoleons are green. So he's sent forward with 4 under-strength infantry regiments and 1 battery of 4 guns. Now the battery should at full strength have 6 guns. It does not, so that battery itself is only at 2/3 strength. It's a very small force, but it's all that Howard has available. He doesn't have any more men available because nobody's come up in support yet. So over on Barlow's Knoll, over on what's Blocker's Knoll at the time, Barlow's division is being hammered. He's being hammered by Dole's and Gordon's brigades from Rhodes' division. He is being hammered by Hoke and Hayes' brigades from Early's division. He's being surrounded on two sides. He's taking fire from both sides. He's in a terrible crossfire. Barlow himself is wounded, badly wounded. His men actually think he's dead. They leave him for dead on the battlefield. It's only after the battle that we'll discover that he was not killed on the battlefield. But Schimmelpfennig is also being enfiladed by that gunfire by Rhodes's artillery from Oak Hill and taking infantry attacks as well. So the 11th Corps units are about to fall back. Costa, Colonel Costa, has only assumed command of the brigade a month before, on June the 1st. He's the senior colonel. He's only 23 years old, but in terms of seniority, in terms of when he was promoted to colonel, he is the senior colonel. Therefore, command of the brigade falls to him on June the 1st. He has those brigades and he doubles them from, and it's so, you know, we have a slow march, we have like a walk and a slouch, and then we have a formal slow march. We have a quick march, which you've seen on parade, and then you have double time. So these men are effectively jogging down from East Cemetery Hill, jogging through the town, trying to find a side road, which is why they come down Stratton. The rest of the roads are choked with ambulances, ammunition wagons, wounded coming back, stragglers, civilians trying to flee. So the main roads are becoming blocked, and so Costa looks for a side street. He finds Stratton and he doubles his brigade down Stratton. When he reaches the railroad tracks, he detaches the 73rd Pennsylvania. He actually detaches one of his regiments as a fallback and as a reserve for himself. So he is the reserve that's being committed, but he doesn't want to commit all of his troops. He himself wants to hold a reserve just in case. So he detaches 200-something men from the mosquito bite. 200-something men from the 73rd Pennsylvania at the railroad station, which is now like the transit area, up by the Lincoln Diner. If you visited Gettysburg, you know where the Lincoln Diner is. And so to hold that position, to hold that railroad station area, the railroad station itself and the warehouse area there. So he detaches. So his brigade is now down to 970-something men. My math's not exact on that. I could actually I'll go back and check Adams and pull the exact figures on what the musters were, and I'll post them later on this evening underneath in the comments. But around 970 men is all that come down Stratton, turn here through the gate that is no longer here, and turn into Kuhn's Brickyard. And they turn into Kuhn's Brickyard because it's really the only defensible position that they have. The other positions are, as I say, farmland with wheat fields. So at least Kuhn's Brickyard has some split rail fences. It's a fenced brickyard. It's about 5 acres in total. It's laid out irregularly. They say it's in the almost pentagram shape, but not quite. It's very irregular. Its southwest corner is cut by Stevens Run, so there's a water source here and some split rail fences, but then there's also a barn here, the brick kilns, and also the Kuhn family house. So it is, amongst all these wheat fields, it is a focal point, and it is the best defensive position that they can find. Not a great one. If you stood against one of those split rail fences, you'll know it's 3 rails with gaps between them. So if you're dropping down behind that split rail fence and hoping that it's going to provide you with cover, it's going to provide you with scant cover against incoming musketry and incoming artillery. So with those 3 regiments that he has, Costa moves into the Brickyard at double time. So the men have been jogging all the way down the hill. Remember, this is July. The night before it had rained. There'd been thunder squalls the night before. It is a humid day. It is a hot day. These are men wearing wool uniforms. These are men that have marched to the battlefield. They are now being asked to move at double time to the north of the town. Those canteens barely contain a quart of water. So these men are hot, these men are exhausted, and these men have run to this battlefield, so they are already tired by the time they get here. So I'm right here now by the marker for the memorial for the 27th Pennsylvania, which is one of the regiments here. These buildings behind me are not, obviously, they are cement block 1940s, 50s vintage. So that's not the Brickyard, but I'm actually in what was the Brickyard. I'm going to come up here to the marker for Costa's brigade itself. 1st Brigade, 2nd Division, 11th Corps, Colonel Charles Costa. So you can see we're in a very small area here that's been able to be preserved. Posted a couple of videos on TikTok earlier about battlefield preservation and how difficult that is in an urban environment where battlefields have been built over. So I'll reference those in the comments to this video tour as well later on. So we're here in the Brickyard now, and so let me just turn my sight out of the sun and get I actually can see the camera and what's going on. So we're here in the Brickyard. He's arrived, Costa has arrived with 3 regiments here in the Brickyard. He has the 134th New York, which was his own regiment. He was the colonel of that before he was promoted to brigade command. He has the 154th New York, and he has the 27th Pennsylvania. So 27th Pennsylvania is mostly Germans from Philadelphia, so it's one of the German-speaking regiments in 11th Corps from Philadelphia. The 134th is from the Schenectady area of New York, and the 154th is memory trick Chautauqua, I think. I don't know whether I pronounced that right. I'm horrendous with New England naming conventions. It is trash day here in Gettysburg today, so there are trash trucks running around everywhere. It's a little bit noisy sometimes, so if there's any truck noise, it's trash trucks. So as I said, Costa is only 23 years old. He joined the army at the beginning of the war as a private. He's been commissioned as an officer, and he's risen rapidly through command to become a regimental commander and then a brigade commander. So they arrive here at the Brickyard at around 3:30 in the afternoon, just as Barlow's division is falling back, and just as Schimmelfenning's division is falling back, and just as the victorious Confederate brigades that have pushed those men back are now coming forward in strength towards this position, because as I say, it is a focal point, and if you see men moving around here in blue uniforms, you're going to charge on that point and try and drive them out of that Brickyard. So as I say, he's supported by Heckman's battery on his extreme left with 4 smoothbore Napoleons. They open up with canister. The battery will fire 113 rounds, mostly of canister, so about 28 rounds per gun during its time engaged here. And there's a memorial to it on the corner of, I want to say, Lincoln and Carlisle, right in the corner of Gettysburg College, right in the corner grounds of Gettysburg College. There's a memorial to the battery there, so that's approximately where the battery fought its delaying action there with its 4 guns. 2 of those guns will be captured, will be overrun and captured, but Heckman will be able to make off with 2 of his guns and save 2 of his guns. So as I say, the artillery are pouring fire in, they're pouring canister fire in, so that's when you've turned your cannon into a giant shotgun and you are firing balls the size of just slightly smaller than a golf ball. Instead of like one big shell, it's like balls packed together that just spew out in this shower of canister. So it's absolutely deadly. It's like giant shotgun effect. Costa's 3 regiments double into the Brickyard. They barely have time to take up a line behind the split rail fence. There is no split rail fence here today. There is I guess a symbolic 3-bar iron fence to symbolise that. I'm not quite sure when that's put in. It's in a pretty rusty and concretey, horrible state. I don't know whether the Park Service, as they own this property, will actually come and put a regular split rail fence in. That would be nice. But they occupy this brickyard. They barely reach it in time, and they report, after action reports, are that the Confederates at that point the ground slopes up slightly here. So the ground slopes up slightly, the farmland sloped up slightly, and so it drained away down towards Stephen Run, good piece of farmland. You'll plough that, but it will drain nicely. So the ground rose slightly, and the Confederates are barely 200 yards away, so well within musket range, well within musket range, well within musket range of the Union troops that had just arrived here, and well within the Union troops that had just arrived here were well within musket range of the advancing Confederate troops. Now, Custer has 970 men here. Coming in against him are Avery's brigade, mostly North Carolinians, and Hayes' brigade, mostly Louisianans. Those two brigades have about 3,000 men. So if we round Custer up to 1,000, he's outnumbered 3 to 1. He's already outnumbered 3 to 1. His men have run down here. Okay, the Confederates have been fighting, so they are equally as exhausted, but their sheer weight of numbers is going to overrun this position. So the 154th form in the centre, the 134th form on their right flank, the 27th Pennsylvania forms along the left flank. It doesn't have enough strength to extend to reach the artillery battery, so it's just a very thin line of 970 infantrymen that begin to fire into the advancing Confederate force. Now, the 154th report that some of their men were able to fire 6 rounds. Some of their men reported that they fired about 9 rounds. So in the heat of battle, if you're trying to load, but you're a little bit tired, so in the heat of battle, you can estimate that an average marksman is going to be able to load and fire twice a minute. So if you fired 6 rounds, you're engaged for 3 minutes. If you fired 9 rounds, we're talking about 4.5, 5 minutes. The engagement here is costly and it is quick. It is a bitter fight here as the Confederates pour in, and they pour in against that split rail fence. Of course, they take musket fire from Custer's brigade and they take casualties, but the sheer weight of numbers is going to propel them forward, and the sheer weight of numbers is going to overrun Custer's brigade. I guess it's trash day and lawn care day here today at Gettysburg. So let's take before he moves in here with his mower and his strimmer, let's get a slightly better look of the brickyard itself. So we'll move down to the big memorial here, which is for the 154th New York. That's a fair-sized memorial here, as you can see behind me. You can always tell the New York monuments on the battlefield here at Gettysburg because they happen to be, by and large, except the Pennsylvania monument, of course, they happen to be some of the largest monuments on the battlefield. I don't know whether it's an ego thing for the New York Battlefield Commission, where Dan Sickles decided that he wanted the biggest monuments on the battlefield. This is the 154th, so they're in the center. So I'm now moving right across the Union line. I'm moving east across the Union line and towards the position of the 134th New York, which was the extreme right of the line. So I suppose I could double myself, but the weather is quite disgusting and I have no inclination to run. So just passing the right flank marker of the 154th, and there is here against this fence, as you can see, there is a marker to say that the 134th extended through this garden and through the garden of the houses beyond. And so this was a very thin line. One of the things I was talking about earlier in a little TikTok I uploaded was the issue with battlefield preservation. So most of the Gettysburg battlefield, when you tour the battlefield like Confederate Avenue, McPherson's Ridge, Cemetery Ridge, Culp's Hill, Little Round Top, it's still very rural, it's still very open. It's still very much unchanged, other than there's more trees now. But here north of the town, I'm going to step into the shade near the mural here. We'll talk about the mural in a little bit. But north of the town, where we are now around Gettysburg College, around the community college, around the location of the Weiss Market. So if you've been to Gettysburg, you've taken a tour, the Weiss grocery store is. You'll have appreciated David dropping his phone once again. It's not the first time we've done that on a battlefield. Let's just secure this. Oh. So, the north side of the town has been built up in the 150 plus years since the Battle of Gettysburg. This is now a residential area clustered all around the university, all around Gettysburg College. So quite a built-up area. This would have been open at the time, open farmland at the time. So I was talking in the little TikTok that I did. I tried to get it under 3 minutes, which was quite difficult for a man that wanted to complain a lot, and that's me. That it's difficult when you're trying to find locations on the battlefield where the units fought. If, like with the 134th New York, the line, and where we would want to mark that line with the left flank and a right flank marker and a memorial to the unit, is underneath housing. And it's the same with the 27th Pennsylvania. Their line would have extended back towards Stratton Street. There's housing there as well. So the battlefield in this part of town has been built over, and trying to find parts of the battlefield becomes a detective exercise. This part can be found, as you can see. The Park Service have got a cleared, preserved grassland here of a couple of acres with some memorials on it that they are maintaining. A Pennsylvania memorial, a brigade memorial, a New York memorial, and a plaque to the 134th New York. A couple of flank markers here for the 154th New York as well. But it's a small area. It's not on the auto tour. Unless you knew that there'd been an engagement here and you were coming specifically to look for the Brickyard fight, Kuhn's Brickyard fight, you wouldn't know that it had happened. One of the reasons you won't know that it had happened is because it's not really recorded anywhere. So if we go back to Stackpole, Stackpole's history of the Battle of Gettysburg, it's not recorded in Stackpole. If you go back to Codrington and Study in Command, it gets barely 2 sentences there. Ken Burns doesn't mention it, and Ron Maxwell certainly doesn't mention it in his TNT Ted Turner movie. In fact, I don't even know whether the 11th Corps in it at all, and Oliver Otis Howard at all. I don't even think that they feature even in the director's cut of the Gettysburg movie. So you won't necessarily have read of this engagement. One of the reasons why it doesn't come up a lot is because in the official history, which is that collection of dispatches, after-action reports and letters and communication, official communication, that were gathered together after the war, printed in bound, thick-bound books. So we can refer to the official history and we can look at documentation that were written by regimental commanders to their brigade commanders and brigade commanders to their division commanders. The after-action reports. There are no after-action reports in the official history from either the 4 regiments of Costa's brigade or the brigade itself. There's no after-action reports in the official history. So if a historian is looking to write a history of the Battle of Gettysburg and there's no source material for this, there's no source evidence right there in the official history, it's easily overlooked. So to find the history of this, you've got to go back to find the regimental diaries of, say, the 154th New York, or you have to start getting into personal letters of the officers and the men that were members of this unit. So it is possible to research this, and it is possible to find out more information about this, but not from the official history and not from some of the older core canonical histories of Gettysburg, which a lot of the newer histories, of course, kick off and expand from. So that's why the fight here at Kuhn's Brickyard is not widely known. If it had been inserted in the Gettysburg movie, it would have maybe taken 60 seconds to have done this. You could have had Custer's men coming down, screaming, shouting, double up into the Brickyard, and then just been completely pushed back by a Confederate line. So you could have inserted it, but it would have been another minute to add to an already long movie. And if you've watched the director's cut, which is a very, very long movie, you know, any minute that you can clip from a movie like that, any scene that you can chop from the screenplay, probably made that a better movie. So this could be something good for some reenactors to do with Lionheart films, maybe, to find a split rail fence and talk about the Brickyard fight. That would be an interesting thing to watch. You could probably get away with like a 15-20 minute short documentary on that. So Lionheart, if you're watching, I'll tag you in an email, I guess, see if you're interested in that. But the mural, I want to talk about the mural. As you can see behind me, there is a mural painted on this wall, and it's behind glass, so it's reflective and protected, and I guess it's a protective finishing to stop it fading in the sunshine. But you can see, as well as my reflection, you can see that here on the Union right, Avery's brigade, the North Carolinians, completely overrunning the 134th. So the 134th New York were overrun first. Over on the left of the Union line, the 27th Pennsylvania is hit by Hayes Louisianans, so one of those Louisiana Tiger Brigades. They come crashing in against the 27th Pennsylvania. So 27th Pennsylvania gives way on the Union left. The 134th New York gives way on the Union right. The 154th in the center of the line for a while don't realize what's happening, and they stand their ground, which is why when some of the regiments have reported that they fired 6 rounds per man, the 154th records that it fired up to 9 rounds per man. So for a minute and a half, 2 minutes, the 154th New York stood on its own here. As a result of that, it took horrendous casualties. These regiments did take horrendous casualties. As I said, Heckman's brigade lost 2 of its 4 guns. 2 of its 4 guns were captured. But the casualty rate here for the 154th is the highest regiment casualty rate during the Battle of Gettysburg. 77% casualty rate. So that's killed, wounded, captured, missing. 77%. So when the 154th that evening tries to reassemble itself with 11th Corps, tries to reorganize itself on East Cemetery Hill, the 154th New York has 3 officers and 15 men. So only 18 men make it back to the hill that evening. The 134th New York, which was the largest regiment in the brigade, about 400 men, so it was the strongest regiment in the brigade, about 400 men. When they get to East Cemetery Hill that evening, they only have 5 officers and 27 men left. They started with 400, they have 32 men left at the end of the day. The strength will be brought up a little bit later when that detachment of 50 men per regiment returns to the brigade, so those regiments will increase a little bit in strength. Some of the stragglers, some of the men that have been missing because they couldn't make it to the hill, so they ducked into civilian houses, they hid in barns, they hid in outhouses, they hid in cellars and in attics, and some of them will manage to sneak back and rejoin the Union lines that night or the night of the 2nd. So those regiments will come up to more than that 18 and 32, but certainly Custer's brigade took a heavy toll here, and its actions just being able to delay the Confederate advance, to delay Hayes Louisiana brigade and delay Avery's brigade, just for that 10 to 15 minutes of confusion here at the Brickyard, of that fighting, that fighting that was at first muskets, then men in with the bayonet, then men in with the rifle butt and with the fist, before they're driven back. That 10 to 15 minutes was sufficient for what was left of Barlow's division, what was left of Schimmelpfennig's division, to, in their disorganized state, pass back through the town of Gettysburg and retreat towards Cemetery Hill. So, as I said, Howard effectively sacrificed Custer's brigade so that he could get more men back from Barlow's and Schimmelpfennig's division. He sacrificed Custer's brigade because it would buy time for 3rd Corps and 12th Corps to come up. So 12th Corps and 3rd Corps will come onto the field later that afternoon. 12th Corps will come up at around 6 o'clock in the evening. Elements will start to come up. So Howard's decision to establish a reserve on Cemetery Hill, he had a good eye for terrain. That was going to be the defensible position. That was the highest piece of ground, the most defensible piece of ground. So a good eye to pick out that terrain, and a good decision to hold a reserve back there. He didn't throw his entire force forward. If he'd thrown his entire force forward, it would have still have been overrun, but there'd have been nothing to fall back upon. So good decision in picking East Cemetery Hill, good decision in locating a reserve there, and a good and brave decision to send forward a brigade as effectively almost a sacrifice to buy time for the rest of the army to either fall back or come up in support. So there's often a debate on that first day battle about who made the decision to fight here. I think the decision to fight here was John Reynolds. Buford could have pulled back. If Reynolds had arrived and said, "We can't hold this land, we can't hold this ground, we're going to fall back," everybody would have fallen back. But John Reynolds decided to fight. And once John Reynolds had made that decision to fight, 1st Corps was committed, 11th Corps was coming up in support. After John Reynolds fell, the decision fell upon Oliver Otis Howard, as senior officer on the field, to decide whether to continue to fight here or whether to fall back. He would have fallen back probably in disarray. I don't think they would have been pursued, the Army of the Potomac, I don't think they'd have been pursued beyond Gettysburg. The Army of Northern Virginia would have concentrated here. Ewell would have waited for Johnson's division to come up. Lee would have waited for Longstreet's division to come up and concentrated the Army of Northern Virginia here, and the Union would have fallen back to the Pipe Creek line. But Howard continued with Reynolds' initial decision, which was, this ground is as good as any to fight on, we will fight here. And so Howard decided they will fight here, and that's why the Battle of Gettysburg is fight here. There is some contention because Meade is not getting messages back from his 2 corps that he knows are in the Gettysburg area. He's not getting messages back, so he dispatches Major General Winfield Hancock, commander of 2nd Corps, who rides forward to find the army. He finds the army at Gettysburg. Hancock and Howard are not the best of friends, but Hancock and Howard have some discussion. Hancock concurs that this is good ground to fight on. You will see in the Gettysburg movie that Hancock arrives and decides, but Hancock, that this is great ground to fight on. There's no real discussion there with Howard. So there's some debate whether you are on Team Hancock or whether you're on Team Howard, and why can't you be on Team both? Because Howard behaved superbly on day 1, in my opinion, and Hancock behaved superbly really on day 2 and on day 3, up until his wounding on day 3. So you don't really want to detract from either of those men's achievements by creating an artificial argument about whose decision it was to fight here. The decision to fight here was John Reynolds. That morning at 11 o'clock, John Reynolds decides, we are going to fight. The army is going to fight a battle here. 1st Corps are going to open that fight. Everybody's going to come up in my support. We're going to fight here. Why the hell not? So the whole Howard and Hancock thing is a little bit silly in my opinion. So Custer's brigade fell back onto East Cemetery Ridge, where they reform what they have. They are engaged again on July the 2nd. A Confederate assault on East Cemetery Hill and Culp's Hill. So the assault on East Cemetery Hill They are involved in that. But on the 3rd of July, East Cemetery Hill is really not under attack. There is some engagement on Culp's Hill over to their right, and of course the big attack comes in Pickett's charge over on the centre of the Union line, but they're not involved in that. So the battle concludes on July the 4th and 5th. As the night of the 4th, the Army of Northern Virginia begins to pull out of Gettysburg and begin its retreat back to Virginia. So on the 5th, the survivors of Custer's brigade are able to move back into the town, are able to move back to the north of the town, back to Kuhn's Brickyard, to try and locate wounded comrades, to try and round up any of their comrades that have been in hiding in civilian buildings, trying to avoid capture, and also to collect and bury their dead. So that takes place on the 5th. And that really concludes the action for Custer's brigade on July the 1st and obviously July the 2nd, but the Brickyard fight in particular. It's an interesting fight. Wish a documentary company like History Hit or Lionheart would get hold of some reenactors and do a small reenactment. Obviously you couldn't do it here, you'd have to find an open piece of farmland to do it in, but to do a reenactment and talk about the Brickyard fight, because I think it's an interesting fight. I think it tells us a lot about the nature of command and the nature of having to make a sacrifice, and it tells us a lot about the personality and the courage of Custer and his men, but also about the decisions that a man like Oliver Otis Howard, Major General Howard, in command has to make and be prepared to lose his men. So I can't really see the screen at the moment because of sun glare, but I saw I had some comments. When I conclude the live stream, those comments will get uploaded to the Facebook page and the video will get uploaded to the Facebook page, and I will go through the comments and respond to the comments as I can. So I'm trying to keep this short. I think I've just gone over 45 minutes, so I'm going to wrap it up right now. Thank you for joining me today here at Kuhn's Brickyard. Thank you for joining me on these lunchtime tour series, 30-45 minute chats that we've been having on Tuesdays. There will be another one next week. We are at Bladensburg, Maryland, not at Gettysburg. We're at Bladensburg, Maryland, talking about the War of 1812, Battle of Bladensburg, the last stand of the Marine and Naval detachment at the Battle of Bladensburg. So very interesting story. Another one of those heroic rearguard actions. We'll be talking about that next Tuesday. So if you want to join me, 12 p.m. Eastern on the live stream, there'll be an event link. You can click on that and join me. And there's other events that are listed on the Facebook page, facebook.com/walkingtheground. So thank you for joining me today. These tours from Gettysburg will always be free because I come out to Gettysburg several times a month, do my own research and writing, and while I'm here, I like giving these tours. So thanks for joining me. I appreciate the support you guys give me on the Facebook page. If you know somebody who's interested in military history, Civil War history, American history, and they don't know about the page, let your friends know. Share this video link so that people can watch it after I've uploaded the recording of this, and let's get the news out and let's get more people interested in Civil War history, coming out to the battlefields and walking the ground. I really do appreciate you guys. Thank you very much today.